Hello, dear fans. Today is September 10th, and from today onwards, I'll be starting a new series analyzing world events, starting with the South China Sea. We just wrapped up August, and wow, a lot happened last month. I didn't even get a chance to talk about Ukraine. Look at how intense that situation is. Moscow got attacked, but I didn't mention it because some things you can't just talk about right away. You have to wait, let the dust settle, and understand the full picture. So, regarding Russia, we'll need to wait a couple more days for things to settle. Today, let's focus on the series of events between mid-August and now, involving the South China Sea and the Philippines. Look at the Philippines in July. They were keeping quiet in the South China Sea, not making a sound. But now, the US can't stand still, seeing China's rapid development, especially in July. Despite the global economic downturn, China's manufacturing grew by 5.1% year-on-year, new energy vehicles surged by 27.8%, integrated circuits by 26.9%, and 3D printing equipment by 25.3%. These figures reflect the fast growth of high-end manufacturing. Service industries grew by 4.8%, and total retail sales of consumer goods rose by 2.7%. In July alone, China's total import and export goods reached 3.6758 trillion yuan, a 6.5% year-on-year increase, with a trade surplus of 619 billion yuan in just 1 month. While the world's economy is in shambles, Europe devastated by the Russia-Ukraine war, supply chains collapsing, Russia's still fighting, and Central Asia and the Middle East engulfed in flames. Africa is another story altogether. Then look at the US in July. Their manufacturing PMI was 46.8%, 2 points lower than expected, and has been declining for 4 consecutive months. This indicates that their manufacturing sector is deteriorating. The Consumer Price Index (CPI) only rose by 0.2%, showing weak market demand, and the trade deficit in July was still widening, reaching $65 billion, up by $1.3 billion from the previous month. In other words, they lost $1.3 billion more than last year during the same period. The world economy is bleak, yet China stands out. Naturally, the US isn't happy about that. It's like human nature, people envy others who are doing better. When you have more money, they get upset, thinking it's unfair. Why do you have money when I don't? My loss must be because of your gain. So the US, unable to sit still, started to scheme. They approached Philippine President Marcos, telling him, "You need to claim the South China Sea." Marcos responded, "No way, I can't take on China. I'll get beaten and humiliated, and every time I make a move, you tell me to act, but when I get hit, you don't help." The US retorted with a pep talk, "Stick with it, don't give up. I'll fund you $500 million in military aid and you provide the manpower." Okay, Marcos thought, 500 million. Not much, but better than nothing. The US reassured him, "This is a lot for me, considering my economy, and I've only given Japan $100 million recently. Let's organize a joint military exercise with the US, the Philippines, Japan, and Australia in the South China Sea to stir things up." The US even had Japan provide 10 patrol boats to the Philippines, each equipped with heavy machine guns. Marcos laughed nervously. "Are you crazy? If I fire, China will retaliate with missiles." But in the end, Marcos agreed, reasoning that having ships is better than nothing. They set a date, and the US promised to step in this time, unlike the last incident. Even Australia got involved, hesitantly offering AP-8 a patrol plane after the US criticized them for doing too little. The situation unfolded like this during the US-Philippines 2+2 ministerial dialogue on July 30th, with the US agreeing to provide $500 million to modernize the Philippines forces, and in exchange, the Philippines joined the South China Sea Joint Military Exercise. So, it was set for August 7th, the US, Philippines, Canada, Australia Joint Military Exercise in the South China Sea, UC. What Big Pretty, the nickname for the US, loves most is gathering a bunch of little brothers around him, so he can act all grand and powerful. Oh, the thrill of being the leader really gets him. Big Pretty has gotten used to being the leader ever since World War II. It's been almost 80 years now. If you don't let him lead, he wouldn't know how to live anymore. Even though his economy and military might aren't what they used to be, he still wants to experience that feeling of leadership. So, on August 7th, the US, the Philippines, Canada, And Australia kicked off their joint military exercise in the South China Sea. Just hearing the name four-nation joint military exercise sounds so imposing, almost like the eight-nation alliance back in the day. But when these four actually got together, even the US was stunned. You guys ... what the heck did you send, Canada? You sent a frigate, the HMCS Montreal *. That thing was built in the 1970s. It's almost 50 years old. How in the world did you maintain it to keep it afloat? And to top it off, the ship doesn't even have a single missile, just guns, but I guess I can't blame you. After all, when this ship was launched, anti-ship missiles didn't even exist yet. Then I looked over at the Philippines. Well, look at that, money really makes a difference. They sent two ships, one of which is a newly launched missile frigate, the *BRP Jose Rizal *. Sounds impressive, right? But when you get up close, it only has a displacement of 2,600 tons. Is this supposed to be a frigate? It's barely half the size of one of China's Coast Guard ships. And to top it off, your missile frigate doesn't even have missiles. Where are the missiles? The Philippines sheepishly grinned and said, "Oh, we bought this ship from South Korea. We spent all the money on the ship itself, so we haven't bought the missiles yet." Plus, Korea didn't really have any missiles either. But hey, this is just an exercise, it's all for show. I mean, I did send two ships, didn't I? That's sincerity, right? Big Pretty glanced back and said, "Oh, come on, you've got the nerve to talk. Your other ship is the *BRP Gregorio del Pilar*, the one I sold you 12 years ago. I know that ship very well. It was commissioned in 1967, retired from my Navy, then later transferred to my Coast Guard. After it retired from the Coast Guard, I sold it to you for $10 million. And now you're bringing it back here. What are you trying to do? Return it, no refunds." The Philippines felt a bit embarrassed and said, "Hey, big bro, let's not point fingers. Look at the ship you brought, the USS Lake Erie *. It was built in 1988 and launched in 1991. That's over 30 years old now. I heard it was supposed to be retired last year. What's it doing here?" Big Pretty got annoyed. "Who told you it was retired last year? I'm still using it just fine. It's not retiring until the end of this year." Just as they were talking, they looked up and saw Australia arriving in a P-8A aircraft. "Hey, boss, has the exercise started yet?" With a command from Big Pretty, the exercise officially began. Barely had the exercise started when Australia radioed in, "Boss, we're surrounded." Big Pretty was furious. Surrounded by who? Australia replied, "We're surrounded by Panda's Navy and Air Force. On the right is a missile frigate, the *WZHOU *0568 class, and on the left is another missile frigate, the *WHOO *0548 class. They've got us cornered, and that's just on the sea. My radar also picked up two J-11 fighter jets in the air. And if I'm not mistaken, there's likely an early warning aircraft KJ-50 500 kilometers away, but it's too far for me to see. Boss, I think this exercise is pretty much over. If I keep flying, I might get hit by a laser or they might start dropping chaff. I'm heading back." So Australia turned around and left. The exercise hadn't even been going for an hour, and we already had one country bowing out. Big Pretty was about to lash out when the Philippines chimed in, "Boss, that new ship of mine cost 1.3 billion pesos. Maybe I should retreat for now to avoid trouble. The new ship can go back, and as for the old one, I don't really care if it gets sunk. If they sink it, I'll just replace it with the BRP Andres Bonifacio *. Before Big Pretty could respond, Canada said, "Hey, don't let your new ship leave just yet. Let me move my sailors from the Montreal * onto your ship first. The Montreal * is over 50 years old and slow. If Panda catches up, I won't be able to outrun them." At this point, Big Pretty was rolling his eyes. "Are you guys here to mess with me? If you didn't want to come, you could have just said so. You're making a joke of this exercise." By now, Big Pretty had had enough. He looked down at his ship, the USS Lake Erie *, and sighed. "Am I really no match for Panda anymore? Fine, let's call it quits, end the exercise and head home." And so, on August 7, 2024, the U.S., Philippines, Canada, Australia joint military exercise in the South China Sea, scheduled to last for 2 hours, ended in a rushed retreat. Pandas to frigates, 1056A and 1054A, sailed over. They looked around and said, "Hey, where did everyone go? Weren't they supposed to have a joint military exercise? They left without even taking any photos. How are we going to report back? Hey, come back. Let's take a group photo before you leave. Give us some face, will you?" But Big Pretty was already covering his face, embarrassed, as he sailed away. So, dear audience, this is what happened on August 7th. The so-called four-nation joint military exercise barely got any coverage in our news. Why? Because there was hardly any footage to work with. They couldn't even write a proper story about it. Most people don't even know this happened. Big Pretty came here looking for trouble, trying to make his presence known, but instead of making an impression, he left in embarrassment. When he got back, the more he thought about it, the angrier he became. I spent $500 million on this, and you guys turned it into this mess. No way, I'm going to ask Little Mac for my money back. After returning home, Big Pretty got more and more upset. I spent $500 million on this, and you guys turned it into such a mess. No way, I have to go ask Little Mac for my money back. What the heck was that? The next day, Big Pretty found Little Mac and said, "Little Mac, give me back my $500 million. What was that nonsense yesterday? The exercise hadn't even started properly, and you all ran away. And you dare ask for $500 million. Plus, you requested $200 million from your personal account. Have you lost your mind over money?" Little Mac, seeing that Big Pretty had come asking for it, thought, "Oh man, I knew this $500 million wouldn't be easy to earn. You tried to fool him yesterday, but there was no way he'd let it slide." So, Little Mac, embarrassed, scratched his head and approached Big Pretty. "Big bro, don't be mad. You want to stir up trouble, right? But do we really need to do a military exercise in the South China Sea? Military exercises are dangerous. What if Panda gets annoyed and actually fires an anti-ship missile at us? Who can dodge it, me or you? Their missiles go at Mach 3, no one can stop them. We'd all end up embarrassed, right?" Big Pretty thought about it and realized it made sense, but he still needed to maintain his dignity. So what do you suggest? We won't do an exercise, but I'm not crazy enough to actually fight them. If I could beat them, I wouldn't have waited until now. Do you know how much I've suffered these past few years? Little Mac chuckled and said, "Big bro, I've got a plan. We don't need a military exercise, and you don't even need to show up. I'll handle it on my own. How about that?" Big Pretty was surprised. This Little Mac is actually volunteering. What's gotten into him? Little Mac snapped his fingers. "Big bro, I've been noticing the situation at home. Things are about to get chaotic, opposition against me is growing, and honestly, I don't think I'll finish my term. So, I thought, why not make some extra cash for my future? If you give me another $500 million this time, to my personal account in the US, I'll take care of it. 10 days from now, I'll send out my most advanced Coast Guard ship, the *BRP Parola*, equipped with Japan's latest technology from 2018. I'll go ram Panda's ship and put a hole in it. We'll make it leak. Isn't that exciting?" Big Pretty, trembling with excitement, said, "Go ahead, ram it. But what if Panda sinks your ship afterward?" Little Mac smirked. "I've already thought of that. This time, I'll invite famous journalists and media outlets to join me on the ship. I'll tell them they can film whatever they want, but I won't tell them I'm going to ram Panda. Once they're on board, Panda won't dare do anything to me. They can't just fire a missile and blow up all the journalists, right? If they did that, they wouldn't be Panda anymore, they'd be Israel." Big Pretty laughed and said, "You cheeky little devil. But I've got to admit, this is a brilliant plan. I never realized you had such talent. Fine, let's do it. I'll transfer $50,000 to your account within a week. Just make sure you don't send me a piece of junk as a cover-up." Little Mac replied confidently, "Don't worry. It'll be the real deal, a genuine *Parola* patrol ship, newly imported from Japan. It displaces 300 tons, and I'll ram them with everything it's got. The *Parola* is reinforced with steel from Japan, and I refuse to believe Panda's Coast Guard ship won't sink." Big Pretty's face lit up with excitement. He rubbed his hands together. "Great, let's do it. And if Panda really sinks your ship, you can seek political asylum in my country. I'll make sure you're safe. How about that? Little Mac slapped his thigh and said, "Deal." And so, Big Pretty and Little Mac devised this wicked plan. Did Panda's Coast Guard ship get rammed? Did it sink? Find out in the next chapter.